Hello and welcome. My name is Miriam, and today I have with me Noel Janis-Norton. Noel is a learning and behavior specialist, and she's got over half a century of experience in teaching and working with children and with families. And you've got 8 books out. Two of them have been bestsellers on Amazon. And Noel has been my mentor when I started this line of work, and I've learned so much from you, so I'm really happy you're here.
I'm delighted to be here.
Great. And today we're going to talk about ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And lots of people know that children that have ADHD are quite active, impulsive, and find it very difficult to concentrate on their schoolwork. But there's much more to ADHD than that, and I'd love you to explain.
Sure. One of the things that people don't realize about ADHD is that often the child doesn't understand cause and effect as well as we'd expect them to, given their age and given their intelligence. So they end up being very impulsive, forgetful, disorganized, careless, and this can make parents and teachers very frustrated with them.
And what would you say is a typical experience of a child during a school day?
Well, sadly, the experience often that an ADHD child has is of failure. Not just failure in one subject, but feeling like a failure all day long because they're getting into trouble, because somebody is correcting them or telling them off so many times every day.
And is it any better for them at home, would you say?
Well, in some ways it's better, and in some ways it's worse. ADHD kids do have trouble with transitions, and especially at home, there are so many necessary transitions. They're eating their breakfast, but it's time to put your bowl in the sink, and then it's time to put your shoes on, and then it's time to get out the door. Lots and lots of little things all day long that they have to be doing, which means they have to be paying attention to it, and their mind is just drifting to something else. So this is very frustrating for parents, and both parents and teachers can get to the point where they're forgetting to smile. They're forgetting to appreciate the good qualities of the ADHD child, and they're looking and sounding exasperated a lot of the time. And then, understandably, the child becomes defensive, becomes grumpy, becomes irritable, becomes angry. His experience of life isn't great.
And so what can we do about that? That's really the most important question. What it is that parents could do, and what is it that teachers could do to make everybody's life better?
That is the most important question, because regardless of what we call it, we want to help the child to function better. And it might seem paradoxical, but in order to help them function better, we have to start by accepting where they are now. If we're expecting them to do something that they have not demonstrated they can do, we'll be disappointed and annoyed, which will convey itself to them. So accepting doesn't mean that we love how they're being. What it means is that we're being honest about this is the starting point. And an example of that might be a child who interrupts. All children interrupt sometimes, but an ADHD child is likely to interrupt a lot because of the impulsivity, because of the restlessness, because they're curious about everything, and because they just don't read the social cues. They don't realize that they're not wanted in this conversation. And if we're just going to get annoyed with them, it will only reinforce their view of themselves as an interrupter. So they won't even try to not interrupt. So what we can do, which feels very counterintuitive, or at least counter-habitual, is to start noticing the good things they're doing. And not just the good things, but the okay things. The things that are little steps in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So if we carry on talking about interrupting, let's imagine that you're talking with a friend, and if you wait long enough, you're going to get interrupted.
For sure.
So notice and mention within the first minute of talking with your friend, notice and mention that your ADHD child hasn't interrupted you.
Mm-hmm.
And the more they hear about how they're not interrupting, the sooner they will start to reinvent themselves
Mm-hmm.
as somebody who can control themselves and not always be interrupting.
So what can you actually say? Would you say something like, "Thank you for letting me talk to my friend and not butting in"? Or
You could say that. I would recommend not saying thank you. Not that it's a crime to say thank you, but thank you makes it sort of seem as if they're doing you a personal favor. So I would keep the focus on them and say something like, well, you could say what they didn't do wrong, so you could say, "You're not interrupting."
Mm-hmm.
Or you could focus on what they're doing right. You could say, "You're waiting patiently."
Mm-hmm.
Or "You're being quiet because you can hear that the grown-ups are talking."
Mm-hmm.
So it's good for children to hear what they're doing right, but it's also good for them to hear what they're not doing wrong,
Mm-hmm.
because they have heard a lot about what they're doing wrong in their young lives.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. What else would you advise parents to do differently?
I would definitely, and I do advise parents, to leave more time for everything than you think you need to leave. And an example of that might be getting dressed in the morning. You know that your child could get dressed in 10 minutes, but you also know that your ADHD child is highly distractible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never just 10 minutes, because in the middle they're playing with their Legos. So don't expect it to happen in 10 minutes. Leave 20 minutes for it in your timetable. And then you won't be disappointed and annoyed, and you'll remember to smile. You won't be feeling so grim and stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And research has shown that when parents and children start the day off irritable, it affects the whole rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So we really want our children to have a nice experience of the morning.
And this is something I hear a lot when I speak to teachers. They say to me, "He comes in through the door and I can see on his face that something went wrong for him in the morning." Usually it's a him, because it's more boys than girls.
Yes.
And I know the whole day is going to be a struggle. And that a lot of the times it's something that happened at home during the morning routine before they even go to school.
And because teachers often don't know how to manage ADHD kids, it will feel to the teacher as if there's nothing they can do once that train of emotions is set in place. But actually there are. And the descriptive praise, the mentioning exactly what they're doing right or not doing wrong, that's a really useful thing for teachers to do. And I talk about that in my books for teachers, that teachers sometimes think that taking the time to praise is taking time away from teaching. But actually, well, it's part of teaching, and it makes the whole school day flow so much more happily.
Mm-hmm. And you know, in talking to parents, they sometimes tell me that by needing to praise their children in this way, they start liking their children more, because suddenly they tune their mind into all the good things that their children are doing, all the okay or good enough things that the children are doing, and they see that there's quite a lot that these children do that is quite good, which is taken for granted all the time.
It's very true that we tend to focus on the negative and take for granted the positive. But really, we need to notice and celebrate all those tiny little positive things. Mm-hmm. Our children will feel better. And another thing that happens, not only do we like our children more when we descriptively praise them, but it sort of ricochets back on us, and we realize that we must be pretty good parents because our kid is doing all these good things. So everybody feels better when we take the time to notice and mention the okay things.
Okay, great. Thank you, Noel. And to summarize my understanding, let me know if I've missed something. The first thing that you're saying is about having realistic expectations and psychologically accepting where your child is right now. It doesn't mean that you don't have aspirations for the future, but you're accepting the start point. Slowing down, taking more time to do things, and using descriptive praise, which means saying specifically what it is that your child is doing that you appreciate and you like. And this is a process that takes a while. It's not very easy or natural, but if you can pull it off, you're going to see the results.
And it helps to give yourself a quota. If you say to yourself, okay, well, I'll remember to descriptively praise sometimes, then you won't remember very much because it's a new habit, or it's not a habit yet. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to descriptively praise 10 times a day, each child in my family, then round about tea time, you think, oh, I've only done about 3 or 4, so then you start doing a whole bunch more. And then by bedtime, you've done 10 a day. You feel better and they feel better.
Excellent.
So there's a lot more strategies that I talk about in my books and in my courses and seminars, but that's a good beginning.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we're inviting everybody out there to go ahead and do it, because just thinking about it isn't going to take you anywhere. So thank you very much and enjoy your children.